Today, we're going to be talking about unlocking stronger engagement in 2024 through improved communication. I know this is something that a lot of you are thinking about right now, and we have a fantastic guest here, someone I'll introduce in a bit, but I've known Madison for a number of years. She's actually one of my favorite thought leaders, and so don't get too embarrassed there, Madison. But yeah, I've always really enjoyed her perspective on things, and look forward to this presentation. I think all of you will really enjoy it. Jack, you can go to the next slide here. So we're going to do quick intros and icebreaker. We're also going to be, we'll then turn it over to Madison. She'll share some of the trends that she has. Madison is a data scientist and has does a lot of research with her firm right now, and I think you'll really get a lot out of it. We're also going to then pass it over to Jack and Yannick, and they're going to share around how you can benchmark recognition programs, and we'll give you some kind of a sneak peek of some of the things that we can do, and then we'll do some wrapping up. Throughout, I will be monitoring chat for any questions, and I'll do my best to make sure that your questions are brought up to the panelists, and we'll be able to answer them. Depending on how much time we have, we'll probably leave most of them till the end, just to make sure we're on track with everything. So just kind of be patient, but post when you have questions, and if there's the right opportunity, I'll ask them during the presentations, but if not, it'll be at the end. And so, Jack, if you want to just move to the next slide there. So maybe what we'll do is let's start off with the person I've already been teasing you with Madison. Madison, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, yeah, it's so nice to meet all of y'all. I'm Madison. I'm the director of people science over at Newmeasures. And so I lead the consulting team, and I have a slide with more information about us. So I'll keep it short for now.
Awesome. Let's pass it to Yannick now. Yannick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hi everyone. So I'm Yannick. I'm a human performance and IO psychology advisor at Bucket List. And I have a master's degree in IO psychology, and also doing right now finishing my PhD. So I'm a PhD candidate as well in the same program at St. Mary's University in Halifax, Canada. And really excited to be here. And what I do at Bucket List is find the best way to measure the effectiveness of recognition. So I'm pretty excited, to talk about that a little bit at the end of this talk.
Awesome. Thanks, Yannick. And back over to you, Jack.
Yeah, thanks, Dale. So my name is Jack Harrison. I am the program assessment manager here at Bucket List. So I am the project manager for all of our recognition maturity model assessments that we're doing. I also head up the customer success team here at Bucket List. So I support all of our fantastic CSMs. And fun fact, I was employee number 5 at Bucket List. So I've been here a long time, and I've seen a lot of growth, and it's been an incredible journey. And I'm excited for my first recognition week. It's been a long time coming.
Jack, does that mean you got a gold employee card? Is that what you're
No, unfortunately not. I think it might be in the mail.
Yeah, it's just a virtual one, right?
Yeah,
awesome.
Exactly.
I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Dale. I'm the Vice President for Customer Success and Business Services, and I've been at Bucket List for a couple of years. And before that, I was a leader at a consulting firm that specialized in human performance and employee engagement, things like that. That's actually how I know Madison. So we used to work together, and I thought she would be a fantastic person to bring into this session today to share lots of insights with everybody. So, Jack, if you don't mind just going to the next one here. So here's your icebreaker question for everybody. We'd like to get you to post your answer in the chat, and then I'll ask some of the panelists here. So tell us about a recognition that's made a big impact on you. And so put your comments into the chat. Make sure it's set to everyone. Madison, I'll put you on the spot first. Tell us about a recognition that made a big impact on you in your career.
Yeah, I think I'm going to talk about mine a little more broadly, because something that has been really cool about working at Newmeasures is we have a really strong recognition culture. And on our full team meeting every Tuesday morning, we devote 15 minutes to a shout out segment. So we recognize other team members publicly who have gone above and beyond, or have acted in alignment with our values, or just to highlight each other. So we're always getting recognized and always bringing up those things, and it's just such an incredible practice that we do. So something we want to make sure never goes away.
Yeah, I love that. Yannick, what about you? Is there anything you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I have kind of a quick example here. I like building assessments. I like building things, but when I started in doing that, it's often hard and confusing of like it's an ambiguous the steps that you have to take. And I remember when I was working as an intern, and I was developing a resilience questionnaire for them, and it was really hard, and I worked really hard on it, and it ended up and I was really happy with the work I did when it was completed, and just being recognized by my teammates, by my colleagues, and my boss telling me thank you so much for all that you did. Like you helped us so much. I just felt valued at this moment, and it was all worth it. All the pain, all the suffering, kind of a little bit that I experienced. Building that, the confusion was wow. It was, I felt valued at this moment. So I think that's my example.
That's
Mhm.
awesome, Yannick. Maybe just before I pass it off to Jack for yours, I just want to share, like, Jack and Yannick will be talking about our recognition assessment. And I remember one of the focus group attendees in one of the assessments we did, she said that what I feel about getting recognized is I feel like I'm being seen in the organization. And I always love that one, is that it just, it's not about the recognition, but it's actually how you feel after, and that kind of what Yannick touched on. So that I love that one. Jack, what about you?
Yeah, I actually have a really specific one, and it was one that happened over 5 years ago, and that's kind of tells you how much it stuck with me. It was actually my first week at Bucket List. And if anyone in the audience has ever kind of worked for a startup in the early days, as you can imagine, it was all hands on deck. There was little to no onboarding. And that first week, I think everyone gets those first week anxieties of starting a new job. Like, do they like me? Am I qualified enough for the role? And I didn't get much feedback throughout the week. And then as I was actually getting to my car to drive home on the Friday evening, I got a ping on my phone, and Jason, the CEO, recognized me on the Bucket List platform, just saying how much value I'd added in that first week. And it was actually the first time I remember anyway, being recognized in the workplace. And it was a bit of an aha moment for me with the platform as well, because I obviously came through that. So yeah, that was a big one for me that always
I
sticks
love
with me.
that. That's awesome, Jack. Thanks for sharing.
Mm.
So let's get started here. Thanks for everybody for putting your examples in chat. Some awesome ones in there. And let's pass it now over to Madison. So Jack, you can move to the next slide there, and then Madison, just let Jack know when you're ready to move on to the next one. And as I mentioned before, post your questions in chat, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go forward. So over to you, Madison.
Thank you. Yeah, that's perfect. And Jack, we can go ahead and flip onto the next slide. And just a quick note on who we are at Newmeasures. We're a fully remote firm, but we're based out of Colorado. So that's where I'm coming at you today from Denver. And we help our clients with their employee listening from start to finish. So we do surveys across the entire employee lifecycle, from recruitment to onboarding to engagement, leadership 360s, exit surveys, everything in between. We work with our clients to design them, administer their surveys, build dashboards, reports, analyze data, present findings back to leadership, cascade through the whole organization, and then figure out what the heck are we going to do with this data, right? The action planning, the taking action. So the whole shebang, right? And a really cool fact about Newmeasures is that we are actually owned and entirely operated by women. So we are a firm of all women, which is such a really unique thing that I love to share with people. And, there's times in history when it hasn't been that way, but right now we're still entirely women, which is really cool. And we're a certified women's owned enterprise. So it's really exciting for us. And Jack, if we can move on. So as an employee listening firm, as you can imagine, we collect a lot of data. So, and it's really interesting because we specialize in smaller businesses. So our average client size is around 1,800 employees, and we have clients ranging as small as 30 employees all the way up to 17,000. And so really what sets our research apart is that it's relatable. So often you see these trend reports and they're written using data from these major corporations pulling in billions in revenue. And this report is different because we're focusing on more of the everyday organization with more modest resources. So we simply just do not work with companies that have massive budgets, a sophisticated people analytics team, their team of PhDs. We come in to help our clients put together a listening strategy that makes sense for them so they can make informed decisions about their business, about their people. So this report that I'm talking about, just a small slice of the report here today, right? Because we have limited time. Once it's available, we'll be posting it on LinkedIn so you can get access to the full report. But this report summarizes data from 342 organizations and over 320,000 survey responses. We find it really important to take the time to pull all of the data into one set together so we can let our clients know, how are you stacking up? What are these benchmarks looking like? What trends are we experiencing? And so it's a way just for us to take that step back together. And Jack, if you can move to the next slide. On the right of this slide here, this blue box, this is how we measure engagement. And these metrics really, really matter because they're related to everything you care about. They're related to performance at the individual and the organizational level. They're related to sales, customer metrics, safety metrics, goal achievement, you name it. Essentially, anything that points to whether or not you're running a healthy organization. And the line graph here, this is showing what we've seen in terms of engagement trending over the last several years. And these movements seem pretty slight, but when you're looking at a big data set, they're actually significant shifts, right? So we do see really meaningful trends that happen each year, depending on what's going on in the employee experience. And looking at the overall pattern, you're going to see we had a really impressive spike in engagement at the beginning of the pandemic. This is because people were feeling really taken care of. They came together. We were focusing on that human experience at work because we had to, right? We're working remotely. Leaders were communicating more than ever. So that worked really well for people. But then we started seeing some declines, and then we saw that stagnate for a while. And then engagement is rising again. So the trajectory is positive. Engagement is actually up across all of these metrics in that blue box. But it will take continued effort and this kind of collective commitment to keep the trends going. Expectations are shifting among employees, as everybody on this call here knows. So we really have to understand what's motivating our people, what's important to them right now, so we can sustain this momentum. And Jack, if you go to the next slide, each year we take all of the data that we collected and we run a key driver analysis. So for those of you who are data people, I'm talking about a relative weights analysis. So I can see what items across our entire data set have the strongest impact on employee engagement that particular year. So as you can imagine, after we've done this for many, many years at Newmeasures, some of the same things come up each time, right? So some are really foundational, and these are the things that you would expect, like the ability for people to achieve their career goals at their organization. That is always important. Other things come up really frequently, like recognition, right? So those are foundational. But then there's things, new things that come up that help us to understand something unique that's going on in the state of the employee experience. And right now, what I'm seeing is a great deal of items related to senior leadership communication. So Jack, if you could flip to the next slide. These are our current top 5 drivers of employee engagement. First place is feeling this sense of belonging at work. So I'm going to give this more airtime in a few minutes. So I'm going to come back to this. But for now, I want to talk about the second, the third, and the fifth drivers and how these are all related to senior leader communication. We saw this pattern happening a lot across our clients over the past year, of course. And when I talk to senior leaders about this, a lot of them are actually really surprised about how much they are impacting that individual level employee experience. So I think it's so important for us to realize that sometimes this is the first time senior leaders have thought about this, is how much of an impact they have. And it can be so eye-opening for them because people need to have that connection with leadership. It feels so demotivating when employees don't feel in the loop or part of something bigger. And Jack, if we could flip to the next slide. So it's really obvious at this point that, how much communication from senior leadership matters right now. And it's something that people are holding on to from this pandemic experience that we had just a few years ago. But also it's an important thing. And we did, years ago, we saw record-breaking perceptions of trust in senior leadership during the pandemic. Vulnerability, that communication were so high, and leaders were open to admitting, hey, we don't know everything right now. There is some uncertainty. But even when they didn't know what was going on, they were making those decisions out loud. And then as years went by, scores here went back down. Communication is not as strong anymore. Employees do not feel as informed as they did before. And to further complicate things, we're dealing with economic uncertainty, political unrest, fear of AI, supply chain issues, productivity monitoring, you name it, depending on what you're going through. So the workplace is, of course, changing. And to get through this, people have to trust those at the top of the hierarchy. And, there's all the other complications. Our data have also been showing a steady decline in how confident senior leaders are about themselves. So what we did is we isolated which items declined the most from the previous year among executives only. So when we just isolate those at the very top of the hierarchy, and the item with the most decline for this group is the confidence in their own senior leadership teams to make the right decisions for their organization. I had to triple check the numbers, right? When I saw that, I was like, that something is going on here. And to make it more interesting / worse / important, engagement among executives is down. So even though engagement is up for all the other groups, y'all saw that line graph, it is down for executives. And it's being driven primarily because of declines in how they respond to the item. This organization is on track to be successful in the future. So that's a really powerful statement. Jack, if you go to the next slide. So really, the punchline here is that we have this paradox of uncertainty because senior leadership teams may not feel confident in the future, but at the same time, what employees need the most to deal with this uncertainty is to trust their leadership to steer the course. They need communication from executives, but they're just not feeling energized to provide it right now. So that's, that's a really important piece, right? That we really have to be thinking about what can we do to get our senior leaders energized again, to start communicating, especially when information or confidence are on their own is feeling pretty slim.
Madison,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Jack, first.
I was going to ask, do you think it's important to recognize senior leaders? And do you think, in effect, that they're grossly unrecognized?
Absolutely. No, I think that's a huge part of the story is, leaders are human too, and burnout is really high among them. And they've been dealing with a lot over the past several years. And so, I could talk a lot about that, but I think that is a really important part of the puzzle.
Madison, one of the attendees kind of made a comment around that this gap on the senior leadership side leads to micromanagement and headache for everyone. Can you maybe share a little bit about what you're finding is the spillover that comes from that gap in the senior leadership side?
Oh yeah, no, that's such a great point. So it's there's the why, right? So and just anecdotally, I'm hearing so much from leaders. I ask them what is going on, right? What do you think is going on? And they're like, we just don't feel confident in our own people, right? And then a lot of my clients have experienced rifts, turnovers, huge changes, and also they're operating with less information, right? All the uncertainty. So that's a huge piece of what I'm hearing, and to close that gap. What I'm telling them is you have to communicate anyway. You have to make those decisions out loud because y'all were doing it during the pandemic, right? You were still telling people, we don't have all the information, but this is what we can tell you. And we can't stop that. Once people get used to that, we can't stop. And we have to better understand the why, right? Why they aren't doing it, why they're not feeling that motivation, what resources they need to do more of. And as we know, recognition is such a good motivation tool as well. And so sometimes this job gets really hard for people and it feels thankless. And so, yeah, there's a lot that goes into that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing. Yep.
Next slide.
Yeah, thanks. So the other point I want to make is, yeah, here. Okay, so moving on from the communication theme, moving on from the leadership theme, another thing that's really bubbling up is belonging. So over the past several years, while I've been working in employee listening, I've been so interested in the story of belonging and how it went from being completely absent on the top driver list to becoming a runner-up, to hitting the driver list, to now climbing its way to the #1 spot. So it's so important to employees right now. And as you saw, it's the top driver of engagement, but what you didn't see in these slides is it's also the top driver of retention as well. And I know this is not a huge surprise, right? Anytime we ask people on exit surveys or, engagement surveys, what's your favorite thing about working here? It's the people, right? The people make the place. And when I talk to my clients about this, I remind them that spending time here is a strategic investment. We are all human. We all crave that connection. And those moments that might feel like a waste of time, like the 10 minutes at the beginning of a Monday morning Zoom call where people are sharing stories about their weekend, this is actually part of your retention strategy. These moments might feel like a waste of time, but they're really productive for your business. So taking that time to ask personal questions, share pictures, recognize each other, because we have to build that community and that friendship at work, because that time is really worth it. So I really wanted to end on this belonging note. It's really been a connective thread through so much of what we're seeing in our data right now. And we talk about it a lot in the report. And I know it's coming up in so many other conversations, so many other firms as well. Leslie, tell that to my last boss. Perfect. And so at this point, I'm going to pass it to Jack and Yannick so they can elaborate more on bucket lists, recognition model, and the assessment process.
Yeah, thanks so much, Madison. So our recognition maturity model was kind of born out of necessity, and it came from conversations that we were having with clients. And these clients were typically a bit more mature. They'd been with us for a few years. They had the platform, they had a solid recognition program in place, but inevitably the question would always come up, like, now what? Or what next? How do we send our recognition into hyperdrive? And to be quite honest, we didn't always have a suitable answer. Anecdotally, we had levers and things that we knew worked with other organizations, but we learned quite quickly that obviously not every organization is the same. So, and that bothered us. So we really set out to become a thought leader in the space of rewards and recognition. And we did that by developing the recognition maturity model, as you see on screen. And the underpinning of any good assessment is really giving you the ability to be able to measure and benchmark. And how we do that is we do a comprehensive assessment based on the collection of qualitative and quantitative data. So what that looks like is we roll out company-wide surveys, we facilitate focus groups, we also interview leaders. And with that data, we then go away and write a report. Yannick and his team obviously do real kind of in-depth analysis of that data. And then we come back to the client with a report. And in that report, there'll be a score, which will essentially let them know where they sit on the maturity model as it stands in front of you with the 5 pillars. Typically, what we find is a lot of the clients starting off who have a recognition program in place, they tend to be in the starting or reacting columns. And this isn't bad. This is a good place to be, but it just means that they haven't really kind of woven it into the fabric of the organization. It's not part of the company language as much as it should be. So what we do then is we put in a strategy and a roadmap, and to how, and kind of using the data, we give them a roadmap out to how we can get them kind of moving up and to the right of this maturity model and into them higher quadrants. And across these 5 phases, we actually assess 4 different dimensions, which Yannick is now going to go through. So dimension 1.
Yeah, so I'll just thank you, Jack. I just want to add something before that is some of the reason also why we do this assessment is that recognition is so powerful. And sometimes, when you implement a recognition program, you're not exactly sure where you stand and if you're actually getting all the benefits of recognition. And that's what the assessment can actually tell you. So we actually explore 4 dimensions, and we can tell you based on where you are, either in starting up to maximizing, if you're actually getting the full benefits of recognition. So the first dimension that we have is recognition strategy and leadership commitment. So that is basically, does your recognition program fits well with your organizational objective? And also, is the leadership committed to it? So I think that fits really well, with Madison's talks as well. So is the leadership, engaged and participates in recognition, but also does leadership communicates that or communicates recognition effectively? And I
have a
was
good
just curious.
example.
Yo,
Sorry,
sorry,
Yannick.
Jack, you go.
I was going to say I have a really good example of this based on an interview we did recently. And it was with a relatively new leader who was new to the organization. And he was saying that when he first started, he was recognizing as much as possible. He was maxing out his points. And then he got busy. And I'm sure everyone can attest, your first couple of weeks in a new job, you're kind of learning the ropes, and then the real work hits, and then he just didn't have the time or capacity to actually recognize, which was a really interesting thing. Sorry, Yannick.
No, that's a really good point, and that's kind of think the first step also that you want your leader, to be part of it. And like Madison said, is they kind of sometimes underestimate the impact they can have. So if your leadership is on board, then recognition is going to have a way greater impact, and it's going to be way more likely to create a culture of recognition if your leadership just follows and is in on it and so on. So I don't know if Madison, if you had any thoughts on that as well, or how to communicate, recognition effectively.
Oh yeah, no, like Jack, I just have so many examples. I feel like just like any piece of feedback at work, delivery is everything with recognition coming from leaders. And so I did leadership 360 assessments for years with First Bank, and I would walk through reports with leaders, and so they could interpret their data and start to think about what changes they wanted to make. And I had a leader who was so shocked because her results for recognition were so much lower than she expected. Her direct reports and her peers did not think she was strong on it, but she thought, oh, I'm doing a great job. And so once we unpacked what was going on, we figured out that her communication around recognition just wasn't landing. She was not being specific at all. She would just tell someone you did a good job, but she wouldn't tell them why. She wasn't personalizing it at all. So what she started doing after that is get really detailed and talk about the impact and the significance of what that person did. And she also decided to revisit her method. So instead of a private Slack message, she would step into their office and let them know in person, and share things publicly too, in their weekly team calls. And these were little tweaks, but they make a huge difference. I feel like so many times I see it over and over again is the leaders are committed, but their actions aren't necessarily sticking or landing, or those messages aren't getting through. So it's thinking about the strategies for going the next level are so important.
One thing we also found as well is leaders really have to know their individual team's wants and needs when it comes to recognitions. So for example, one person on the team may love the public recognition, whereas another person, that might be their idea of hell, right? So it's really important that you get to know your team and understand what makes them tick and how they like to be recognized.
So well said.
Yeah, and Dale, quickly to answer your question in the chat, like no one answered yes, but it's going back also to that leaders are often like unrecognized, your question, Jack, before, and perhaps it can help in terms of leadership commitment. If leaders are also recognized by employees, they might see the value in it more, so that might be also an effective way to do that.
For sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
So the second dimension, you can put it up. Yeah.
Yep,
So the
sorry.
second dimension is the recognition program design and function. So this is all related to, employee perception or people's perception of the design, function, and accessibility of the recognition program. So is it easy to use? Is it easy to provide recognition? Is there a systematic way to do it? Because if it's cumbersome to actually provide recognition to people, then people are likely not to do it or not see the benefits of recognition. So I think that's just really something that sometimes we don't think about, but it's really important. Do we make it accessible in our organization to communicate recognition? And yeah, the third one is the recognition practices. So this is people's perception of whether the recognition that they're getting, is it authentic? Is it frequent enough? Is it fair? Because if the recognition, there's some issues in the way it's delivered, then it won't have the same impact. So that's also another really important one. If you never get recognized and your colleagues are always getting recognized, but you work also really hard, then you might not be on board on that specific recognition program that's been implementing in your organization. So these are all things that we should be thinking about, but also that are measurable, right? So if you're not doing that well in your organization, it's not the end of the world. There's actually a way to see, to measure that and see where are your strengths and where are your weaknesses. And finally, it's the recognition impacts. So recognition can have a lot of great positive impact on retention, on engagement, on performance, and so on. So this dimension is really to measure it. How is recognition impacting your business metrics? And I think, Madison, you can also add on that how recognition in your research, how the benefits it has on some of your clients or in the research that you've done. I don't know if you can share anything about that as well.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So recognition, how it shows up in my research, it's both direct and indirect. So the direct role it plays is, we include an item on almost every survey that we do, asking people if they feel recognized when they're doing a good job. And this often comes up as a key driver of engagement and for retention for our clients. And so that direct relationship is there. And when we also ask people about why are you thinking about leaving your jobs? So we have a way of pinpointing high-risk employees. Almost always a top reason why they want to leave is because they don't feel appreciated. So that link to retention, it's the ROI is it's just so clear. And I think another huge role that recognition plays is indirect, because it's really connected to everything else. And it's a driver of so many other experiences in the organization as well. So I've definitely had clients use recognition as a post-survey intervention to boost engagement and shape their culture in the direction that they wanted to move in. So it's one that comes to mind is an investment firm that I work with that really wanted to improve their cross-department communication and also the recognition. So they started using recognition. They started recognizing the behaviors they wanted to see when people are communicating well cross-functionally. And then they publicly recognize it, right? So the positive reinforcement got people to do more of the behaviors they wanted to see. But then you also make a positive impact on recognition too. So it's like this really nice mutually beneficial relationship. And recognition is such a motivating intervention for people because you see that impact immediately. It's something you can change overnight and you can see that shift in people right away. So it's motivating. It's in our control. It's something we don't need a massive budget for. We don't need this huge suite of resources. So it's a really great thing to just empower managers, get everybody involved. So it's a huge part of the conversation that I'm having constantly in the employee experience world all the time.
And even also, oh, sorry, Madison. Yeah, and even also, yeah, even also boosting, social bonds within your own organization. You mentioned belonging, and I think recognition can be really effective, in creating a sense of belonging in teams and among the organization as a whole. So the benefits are really great, if it's used effectively.
Yeah, I did an analysis last year last year is when belonging really came into the conversation in this much stronger way for our clients. And so I did analysis to see what do the clients have who are best in class in belonging, what do they have in common? And it's recognition. So that was like the one big differentiator. And sometimes it's not that intuitive, right? And that's why I like to talk about it as being indirect, because it's not like you're recognizing people to feel more belonging, right? You're recognizing people because that's your culture and other things, but it's just belonging is this incredible side effect of having a strong recognition culture. And so it's just, I feel like the data is just always coming back to it. It's such a powerful tool.
I got a question for both Yannick and Madison. If you think of our attendees to this, many of them are either own their recognition program, or they're a part of the recognition program in their organization. What types of questions should they be asking themselves and also their organization to kind of know what state, people, how people are connected to the recognition program and their overall culture? Like, if you can think of it from maybe a human performance type of lens, I'd love to get your insights on that. Madison, do you want to take a shot first?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I feel like that's like such your wheelhouse, Yannick and Jack. So I don't want to even steal the thunder from you on this one at all. I think you go. No, you go.
In terms of your question is more like connected to the recognition program, or
yeah. So like what kind of questions would you want people to ask themselves or ask people in their organization to kind of understand where their overall maturity is and how connected the employees are?
Yeah, so kind of what a question to ask. Yeah, so you want them to so in terms of the practices, so there's different things, you can go on the different dimension, but I think I'm going to focus on impact first. So I think what you want to see, if your recognition program is working well and it's effective and people is connected to it, then something you're going to see is that people will be, more engaged, they will be more satisfied with their jobs. You're going to see the metrics kind of happening. It doesn't have to be to the maximum, but if you compare, let's say you have a team that doesn't really use recognition effectively, or it's not really related to it, there can be other stuff, of course, that can like impact their level of satisfaction and so on. But a team that are really connected to their recognition program, they're likely to have higher, important well-being metrics, I would say, like job satisfaction, engagement, perhaps higher retention rates, and so on. Right. So that would be kind of my quick take at it. Yeah.
Anything you want to add, Madison?
Yeah, I think whenever I have a client who's starting to get serious about something and start rolling something out, so like let's say a new recognition intervention of some kind, I really make sure that the survey questions are aligned with the stage of the journey that they're in. And so it's, coming right out of the gate, it might not be reasonable that everybody is using it and is comfortable with it yet, but we at least want to make sure that, people are aware of it and they know how to use it. And then maybe a few months later, we ask those more mature questions. And so I love to gauge where people are in the journey, seeing how they're adopting it and also what their goals are. And so, Yannick, what I love what you said is I also love thinking about the outcome metrics. And so if it is important to senior leadership that, we really need to get ROI on this, intervention or whatever it is, let's make sure we kind of do some pre and post measurement so we can understand how things went before, during, after. A lot of different ways we can do that. And I've even had organizations pilot interventions in parts of their organizations where they're quite large, and we're able to kind of do control group quasi studies, and those can be so fun.
Yeah, pilots are fantastic.
And I think also, Dale, another area where you can see that is also by conducting interviews and focus group, so you can really get a better idea of how employees are talking about recognition as a whole, and do they feel comfortable talking about it, and that I think would be a good way to gauge it as well, because if they don't feel comfortable talking about it, or they're kind of hesitant on it, then you can see that's a clear sign that perhaps they don't feel safe to express themselves, and recognition is they're likely not to be connected to that at all.
Yeah, awesome. Maybe Jack, we'll go to the next slide. There's a couple of questions in the chat, and I know I suspect that you guys may have questions for each other as well, and some thoughts. One of the questions, Madison, is what do you think is the key differences between inclusion and belonging?
Oh, well, it looks like Kate answered this like perfectly in the chat.
This
That
analogy is so
Textbook right
good.
there, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
inclusion is the action and belonging is the environment, and that's huge. And I have clients measuring in this in so many different ways, and I think it really comes down to that, because there's so many different ways you can skin that cat. But yeah, it's like when you think about D, E, I, and B, people like to lump them all together, but they are all slightly different things, and we have to measure them appropriately. So that's, yeah, that was such a great way to put that.
Awesome. Great. I'm going to just kind of pass it around the table here, just to kind of with last few thoughts or anything that you've got questions for each other, and I'll still be monitoring chat. So, Jack or Yannick, do you have any questions for Madison, or Madison the other way?
Gosh, of course, like I want to see more of I want to see more of your model and how you're measuring things and everything. So I'll take that offline another time. But I think that it was really great for me to see that, just because I think it helps to give those stages and those phases of maturity, that language as I'm thinking about this with so many different organizations, and you're able to really quickly look at that and see where people can put themselves. I love how you articulated that.
Thank you.
And I just have a quick question for you, Madison. Like, I don't know if it's okay, like if you don't have an answer to that either way, but in terms of like the research that you do with all your, the organizations that you work with, I was just wondering, like, do you see a lot of organizations that have kind of effective or comprehensive recognition program integrated? And when you measure recognition, like, do they have like nothing in place, or they actually have something in place?
Yeah, definitely. So I see the whole spectrum. So I work with clients where they have very sophisticated recognition programs and softwares, exactly like Bucket List, and they partner with experts and really get this off the ground to be very serious about it. And I also work with a lot of clients who simply just don't have the resources, the budget, anything. And so they're just trying their best just to make it happen in a very small team, or they're a startup or whatever it is. And so I think it's such a great thing. Recognition is such a powerful tool, and it can look so different for so many different clients. And I think I lost your question though. I'm sorry.
No, I was just asking if you see that a lot, that organizations or the research you conduct, that they actually have a recognition system implemented, or they just do recognition, right? And I can add something to it, like people or organizations actually do have a comprehensive one. Like, do you see any difference in their metrics or well-being outcomes?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And so I don't collect data on that specifically. Like in my data set, I don't have a column that lets me know if they have a formal program or not. But I can say anecdotally, my clients who are more mature when it comes to the employee experience in general, right? They're capping our database, that kind of thing. They are having a lot of conversations about it. So I don't know off the top of my head exactly, what their program is or what they're doing, but they have somebody in the organization who owns it and who has goals around it, and there are KPIs, and they are focusing on it. So it is a huge differentiator. It really is this maturity factor when you take a step back and look at the larger employee experience, employee engagement, all of that.
I've got a there's been a dialogue in chat, and I've got a refined question here to ask the panel. Let me just bring it back up here. Just one sec. I gotta find it. It kind of moved on. Okay. How can we measure the success of inclusion and belonging?
I can always start with this one, and we can pass this one around. But I get this question in a lot of different ways. And so I think the first thing I do is I get on a call with the client, and I want to know, what does that success look like to you? And I need to also understand their listening strategy, what our strategy is going to be, because as you can imagine, I have some clients who really get into doing very sophisticated DE&I or like DEIB surveys, right? And so we have entirely specific and strategic measurement initiatives to dig in really deep. They might be in the process of writing values assessments, values alignments, whatever it is. And so we go in with this really targeted effort. I have other clients who say, hey, you know, CEO would not let us do a specific DEIB survey, but how can we integrate this into other forms of listening that we already have? And then we can get really strategic about, you know, measuring these things in our annual engagement survey or in other methods. And then we really can figure out, you know, what's the why? Why are they measuring this? What does the success look like to them? And what I almost always find is it's not a blanket experience across the entire organization. We have to look at, you know, the experiences within different managers and pockets and teams, because it almost always comes down to manager enablement at the end. It's, you know, it's making sure that they have the resources, the enablement, what they need to show up as an inclusive manager and help to build that environment. Because typically what I find is kind of those bottom up efforts of belonging and inclusion, you know, or creating that environment are so strong. And then sometimes getting it back down the other way can take a little bit of enablement.
For sure. There's maybe one more question, then I'll pass it back to Becca. So a number of people, and we also heard that yesterday as well, is a number of people have a mix of remote teams, employees in lots of different regions, maybe even different countries. How do you foster a sense of equity when you look at all the different variations that we now have in organizations? And because I think from an IO psychology background, you guys have a great insight into, you know, connecting to the human, like to the person themselves. Can you give some insights into this, Madison or Yannick, kind of how you think that an organization can ensure that whatever interventions that you do connect to that person?
Oh yeah. I work with a lot of organizations where when people were getting brought back into the office, there were some job roles where it didn't make sense for them to come back, and then others they had to, right? So that equity piece is huge. And probably the most anger I saw coming from employees and organizations like that is around this topic, just feeling like, why the heck can Dale stay at home, but I have to keep coming in, that kind of thing. And it all really does come down to communication. It's like, it is such a shame when these decisions are made and it feels like things are happening to people and they don't really have that background and they don't have that understanding of why. And then and also, yeah, like you were saying, like weaving in, there's policies, there's practices, there's procedures, there's incredible recognition methods and stuff like that, and making sure that nobody's feeling left behind and all of that. And it has to be intentional. It has to be proactive. It's never too late to start, but once you lose the trust from people, it's so much harder to get it back after the fact.
Yeah, that's awesome. Maybe I'll just kind of open it to Jack and Yannick to kind of talk about what the assessment kind of checks, like some of the questions and things like that. Jack or Yannick, anything you can add?
I just wanted to add like quick thing about what Madison just said on how like on the equity question, if you don't mind, Del. And I think in a good way, you know, to do that as well is, you know, as an organization is ask yourself, you know, it's the idea of psychological safety. So are your workers, are your employees actually able to be themselves, who they are? And, you know, and if you can actually communicate that effectively, understand that effectively, then I think equity is just going to come more naturally.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
so I think that's a really effective step to do.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. Jack, maybe I'll give you last word and then we can advance to the next slide. I think Becca will probably rejoin us.
Yeah, I think my takeaway from this whole seminar today, I think at Bucket List we can be guilty at times of living in a bit of an echo chamber and believing our own hype and recognition is this all-encompassing thing that every organization should utilize. But it's really nice to hear an outsider actually feedback to us how important it is, whether it's recognizing up, recognizing down, peer-to-peer recognition. If you want a happy, healthy, effective workforce, then recognition really is the key driver.
For sure. It kind of relates to something that as we've been evolving our view of recognition programs, is it's about frequency and reach. And then once you achieve those two things, then it's quality of recognition. So that's fantastic. Thanks for everybody. Jack, if you want to just progress to the next slide.